And what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. It is your boy Cheap Ludes, and I'm back with another video today. So you may be asking, why am I on 2KDB right now? There's no new cards out except for Joe Ingles. I don't even have words for that. It's because I am talking about a very specific subject that not a lot of people take the time to explain, and to be honest with you, it does take time to fully understand it, especially with the way 2K operates. So before we get started, please obviously like, comment, subscribe, especially subscribe. Help your boy out. We're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by question mark. I don't care. Just help me hit 1,000 subscribers. It really doesn't matter when that happens. But anyways, we're here to talk about tendencies. Now, I know it's a pretty common thing, when you watch gameplay videos and stuff like that, people will review the tendencies. Up until last year, people didn't really pay too much attention to the tendencies. The history of it really stems from the Galaxy Opal Michael Jordan that came out on All-Star Weekend last year, and people didn't quite understand that why, when they were off-ball defending with him, he would just constantly rip the ball from other players, and people didn't understand why he did that and no one else did. And that was kind of the infancy of really looking into tendencies, especially on-ball steal and defensive tendencies. People have been looking at it for years, but it became a lot more of an explosion since then. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a couple of different cards, to be honest with you, and we're going to go into various tendencies, and I'll let you know which one of these matter. Obviously, if you do ever want to look at tendencies, you can obviously watch YouTube videos, for instance, the ones on this channel, to see, what cards are coming out, if they're worth it or not, that. But if you want to also go a little bit more in depth, because even I'll review a card's tendencies. I'll be like, oh, okay, he has this tendency, this tendency, this tendency, but I don't typically go off and explain a lot about it. Go look for yourself. Use 2KDB. 2KDB is by far the best website when it comes to 2K databases. MT Central is okay, but it's kind of annoying. But this one actually gives the full SIGs and stuff like that too. So when we look through the tendencies, we're going to start with Richie Guerin. And the reason for that is just because I like this card, so I just selected him. But we're going to look at the full tendencies, and I'm actually going to go into a lot of them and explain what that means and what they do. So we'll start with the inside tendencies. So he has a 20 standing dunk tendency. Now, this is a tendency. Some of these are going to be tendencies that don't do a whole lot when it comes to play, but some of them actually matter in game, and that's the ones that I'm going to talk about. So, standing dunk at a 20 means, essentially, it doesn't necessarily mean 20% of the time he'll do it, because 2K's algorithm is almost impossible to predict. It almost seems random a lot of the times, but likelihood that he'll do a standing dunk is 20% of the time that you attempt it, essentially. There's their actual algorithm is a little bit different than that, but just for general speak, let's say that. Whereas driving dunk is 85. Now, 2K, like I've said in the past, is animation-based. It's not physics-based. Which is weird, because all their football games have always been physics-based, but for some reason all their basketball games are animation-based. It's just easier to code that way, I guess. Easier to create. Now, what that means is, basically, if you were using a physics-based engine, it would make every game a little bit more individualized. Certain things would happen in certain ways based on the physics engine itself, and how individual players, how their physics works, how their body type, everything like that. It would take everything into account. 2K is animation based, meaning that if you're using a certain player and he has a certain animation, if you can find the area that animation triggers, and you can get there before the opposite, the opposing player's defensive animation triggers, you will score every single time. So when you're looking at an 85 driving dunk tendency, you're seeing that 85% of the time, well, let's not say 85% is a firm number, but as a rough estimate, 85% of the time that you engage a driving dunk animation with Richie Guerin, he's going to do it. The other percent of the time, he may do a layup, or he may just get stuffed. But for the most part, he is going to complete that driving dunk. Now, he also has a 85 flashing dunk. So why this one's so important is because flashy dunks, while yes, they are cool, it allows you to like dunk over people in very impressive ways, they do tend to get blocked a lot more than just standard dunks. This is especially important when you're looking at modes like TTO, because in TTO, if your guy has a high flashy dunk tendency, he's going to start doing even flashier dunks because it's more of an arcade game, and those get blocked all the time, especially in TTO. So looking at that's pretty important, but most people with like a high driving dunk will have a high flashy dunk unless they're big men. So a 60 alley-oop tendency is also something to look at. If you're a player who relies a lot on alley-oops or does them pretty frequently, having guys that have, a 60 alley-oop, that essentially means that a portion of the time when you go to throw the alley-oop, he's not going to go up for it. That's basically what that means. Or he's going to go up with like one of those weak alley-oop layups like that you see pretty frequently. That's essentially what that tendency is going to do. So putback dunk tendencies, this basically means that this is the amount of time that the CPU, controlling this card, will go up for a putback dunk off a rebound. That's basically what that tendency does. So he has a 5, so he is literally never going to do that. John Stockton has a really high one, so he'll come running from the three-point line to go do putback dunks. So crash tendency is actually pretty important as well. This just states how often this player is going to crash the boards, either offensive or defensive. Richie Guerin has a 35, which means not very often is he going to crash the boards. He has a 90 driving layup tendency. Now, this actually is weird with his driving dunk and his driving layup because they're pretty similar, so it could be either or. Just kind of depends how you're attacking the rim and how the defender is playing it. Depends what animation is triggered. If it's a layup animation or if it's a dunk animation, it just kind of depends. Having a guy who has high in both of these is kind of iffy because you don't really know. Like Isaiah Ryder has like a lower driving layup and a higher driving dunk. That's why he throws down so many dunks as opposed to like guys who even have better stats than him. That's why that is the case. Because like Richie Guerin has a higher driving layup than a driving dunk, which means the layup is going to beat it out occasionally. So, spin layup doesn't really do much. Hop step layup, these are user-controlled things, so it's not something that like in Euro step and floater, they're all mostly Euro-controlled, or user-controlled, I should say. So it's not really going to be something that you're going to need to look at. So we'll go over to shooting. Shot under the basket. This essentially means that are you going to shoot a jump shot or trigger a layup when you're under the basket? Because if you have a high shot under basket, you're going to do more of like I don't know, I'm trying to explain this, more of like a fadeaway jump shot from under the hoop as opposed to like an up and under layup. That makes sense. Shot close is just same thing. Like, are you going to shoot a jumper or are you going to actually attack the rim? That tendency has a lot to do with it. So if you have like a 70 driving layup tendency, but then you have like a 99 shot close tendency, a lot of times you're going to pull up for the jump shot instead of drive to the hole. The rest of these are the same. The mid-range shot isn't really that big of a deal, but these are ones that you actually have to look at. So like a spot up shot mid, this will actually determine whether that you do like a fadeaway or if you spot up. Like if you played with Jerry West or Steve Nash, you'll notice that instead of fading away, they'll do pull-ups a lot. That's because they have very high spot ups and pull-up tendencies. That's basically what those mean. The shot three-point tendency doesn't mean much. Obviously, like you're going to be doing most of that. Contested jumper, like none of this stuff matters. I don't even know why they have this in the game at this point. Just because you can't run CPU controlled games, so it doesn't really make sense. This is just in here for overall padding for the most part. And just padding cards to make them look like they're a lot better towards the end of the year. Doesn't affect the overall, so I shouldn't say that. I misspoke on that way, but basically these type of tendencies are just here so that as they release better and better cards, you can look and they just have like 99 step back jumper mid and stuff like that. So, but I will say the step back jumper and the step back jumper 3, they do make a little bit of a difference because it just depends what animation is going to be used and how well they're going to be able to do it. So like he has a 5 step back jumper 3, so you would think in theory that would mean that he can't shoot step back jumper threes. That's not really what it means. It just means that the animation he uses doesn't trigger as often. So like his certain leaner or step back won't trigger as much as some other ones. So using the glass tendency is pretty huge. This isn't huge in this game, but it will be in next gen when you're able to actually shoot more bank shots, because apparently we're going to be able to control bank shots and like arc and stuff like that. I don't know how it's going to work. It probably will not. But that tendency is going to be more important then than it is now, depending on how they implement that change. So we'll see. None of these really matter too much. They just, same thing, ISO. You're controlling the player, so none of this is really going to really do much. Driving tendency is pretty big. That just means how often are you going to drive, how often are you going to pull up. So like Richie Guerin, for instance, he'll take off from a lot farther than some other guys will. You'll notice when you play guys like LeBron or Giannis, you know, like guys, like areas where normally people would hit pull-up jump shots, they take off and drive straight at the rim. That has a lot to do with their drive tendency. Off-screen and like spot-up drives, none of that really matters. Drive right, like it just means how often he's going to attack right versus left. Doesn't really do anything. I mean, that's more user-controlled stuff anyway. All this dribble move stuff, it doesn't really do anything. No driving dribble moves. Like, once again, it's all user-controlled. Post, Richie Guerin obviously doesn't have anything to do with the post, but the post is actually pretty important when you're looking at big men, because it's actually going to basically show you how much they're going to do certain animations. So if he has a 99 post fade left versus a 70 post fade right, he's probably going to go left a little bit more than he's going to go right, especially if you're neutrally doing it. Like if you're controlling the actual direction, he's going to go that direction, but if you're just straight up, he's going to choose a side, and depending which one's higher, that's the side he's going to choose more often. Understanding that does allow you to play a little bit better offense and defense in the post. Like if you see a guy like Hakeem Olajuwon, he has a higher left than he does right, and you know the person you're playing against isn't incredibly good, and he probably doesn't know that, he's probably going to do generic post moves without, you know, choosing a direction, so you know he's probably going to go left most of the time, if that makes sense. Like that's the best way I can describe it. Hop steps and stuff like that, like those, they don't really do much. Post spin, like these are all user controlled things, so you're not really going to run into it. These are all just like stat padding stuff. Post drive is kind of important because it's actually going to show you if he's going to pull up or drive in when you actually back him down. So understanding that somebody's got a pretty high post drive as opposed to like a post jump shot. Like if I back someone down with Richie Guerin, he's not driving. Like he's got a 15 tendency, he's not going to trigger that animation. So defense, these are the ones you always hear people talk about the most. Pass intercept is obviously just how often are they going to try to jump the lane and steal a pass. Pretty easy. Take charge is how often is the CPU going to take a charge. Honestly, this is 2K. This really never comes into effect. You rarely see charges called in game, and when you do, it's user controlled and they're just trying to cheese the point guard. On-ball steal is how often the CPU is going to attempt and succeed in swiping the ball from an opposing player. That's kind of important. If you see someone with like a 99 on-ball steal, it's honestly better just to let the CPU handle it for a little while, because they'll swipe the ball for no reason all the time. Contest shot basically means that how often is the CPU going to put a hand up when a jump shot is taken. That's also super important, especially if you're not great with your rotations. Like if you're playing against someone who's running 5 out and they're chucking the ball all over the place, like doing 67 passes per possession, like sometimes it's kind of hard to keep up with that and actually like get over to the player who's about to shoot the jump shot. So having guys with high contest shots, they'll go up and play CPU defense on it and put at least a little bit of contest on it. Block shot is obviously how often the CPU is going to attempt and succeed at blocking. This is just basically an attempt though. Like their actual block rating will affect how often they succeed and their player build, but this is how often they're going to attempt to block a shot. That's what this is. So having a dude in the post who doesn't ever attempt to block a shot, if you're not controlling them, even if they have a 99 block and they have a 15 block shot tendency, they're just never going to try. Foul and hard foul. This is obviously how often your CPU is going to commit fouls, especially on drives and things like that. So having big men that have very, very low foul tendencies is pretty clutch, because then they just don't foul people when they drive in. And this game, it's 2K, so it's like it's messed up. It's not like they're not going to go hard on defense. Like, they're still going to go contested. It's just they're not going to foul. Like, that's the only difference. So it's not like a risk-reward thing, like having guys who go harder in the paint but they foul a little bit more often, or versus guys who, like, play a little more timid defense but don't get as many fouls. No, this is 2K, so that's not how that works. They're all going to play defense based on various other things. This just basically says, like, how often they're actually going to foul you. Like, if you go and you play a game of rookie versus anyone, doesn't matter who it is, you'll realize that you don't go to the line very often, and neither do they. That's because the sliders dictate that fouls are very low on rookies. So freelance, once again, that's all stuff that doesn't really make too much of a difference. Play discipline is kind of important. It just basically states how well the CPU, like this card, will run plays. So like Richie Guerin has a 75, which means he sticks to plays pretty often. And he won't go and try to, like, either not run it correctly or, like, mess the play up. If you have guys who have low play discipline and you run a lot of plays, you'll notice they'll start fucking them up randomly for no reason, and you just think it's generic 2K CPU, but it's actually this play discipline tendency right here. Passing, this matters to a certain extent. Like, flashy pass, it's more of a user-controlled thing, but this tendency will basically tell you if you're able to do flashy passes or not. Alley-oop pass, once again, like, it's user controlled for the most part, so there's really no dish to open man. Dish to open man, this tendency really only makes a difference when you're using, so if you're not using icon passing, so instead you're just basically trying to directionally aim it and press A button, which is something I'm guilty of and I try to break as well. This tendency will actually make it a little bit easier to do that. You'll find an open man even if you're not pressing the right direction sometimes. Because you know it's 2K, sometimes you'll be aiming it somewhere else, but it'll just throw the ball completely not where you want it to go. This tendency has a lot to do with it. So anyways, guys, I hope that helped you out. And obviously, in conjunction with, stats, badges, and the SIGs, so the signature animations, you're going to know a lot about a player before you even pick the player up. Also, using 2KDB, you can also just click the jump shot. If you like a jump shot a lot, you can click it. You can see what other cards have that. And you can see what other cards have their upper, too. The upper is a little less important. It's a little bit more important if you're doing no meter. If you're doing meter, the base is a little bit more important. But either way, release timing, everyone has normal release timing. I don't know why that's an option, which leads me to believe that they're going to have different release timings at some point in the game. Kind of sketch. Free throw 1, pretty much everyone has the same free throw. The leaner is kind of important. Basically just moving shots, essentially. Like, that's basically what that is. Spin jumper, no one really does that. Hop jumpers, once again, everyone has basically the same hop jumper at this point. A lot of the cards have the same. So post moves obviously are important. Layups and dunk packages are pretty important, especially when it goes to, like, your go-to dunk. Go-to dunk is actually kind of important, like uber athletic tomahawk off one. That's actually a pretty decently hard block to block. I said block to block, but I mean dunk to block. It's the same dunk that Jay Williams does. But, like, if you want to go with a default dunk that's almost impossible to block, let's find Derrick Rose, and let's see what he does as his signature dunk. Yeah, back scratcher off 2 is his go-to dunk. It's the same one Stephon Marbury and other Derrick Rose do. Derrick Rose is literally the most annoying driving card in the game because he's almost impossible to stop, and there's a reason for that. This makes total sense. He also goes and does, like, straight arm tomahawks. He has a bunch of pretty simple dunks that are actually really hard to stop. That's why this card is so good. In addition to some of his driving tendencies, like he's got a 99 drive. He only has an 80 driving dunk, but he feels like he's a lot harder to stop, and that's because of the rest of his tendencies. He's got a lower driving layup tendency, so he dunks more often, if that makes sense. So anyways, I hope this video was helpful in any way, shape, or form. Like I said, I'm not an absolute guru, so I don't know everything I'm talking about. This is just 100% what I believe these tendencies do. If somebody has more information on tendencies, jump in the comments below. Tell me I'm an idiot, whatever. Tell me what's wrong. Other than that, I'll be back with new content every single day. I appreciate you guys. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I hope this helped you choose the cards a little bit better. So take it easy.